Time to change the sock on this sump. It's overflowing, which means it's done its job as a pre-filter, and now I need to swap it out for a clean one. So why don't my sump filters, why don't my sump tanks, why don't they flood? Why don't they overflow and flood, which is the biggest fear that folks have about having sump filters? There are three main reasons why, and I'm going to share them with you. And number three, hey Jack, and number three is the most important one, so stay tuned for that one. Reason number one is understanding why sumps do flood, and very often the reason is what is called a back siphon. And what that means is that when the pump stops pumping, stops moving water from the sump to the aquarium will use the return lines as a siphon hose and start to move water from the aquarium into the sump and overflow the sump. So the safeguards involve making sure that you don't have a back siphon. And there are two primary safeguards against that. One is what is referred to as a one-way valve. Now, all a one-way valve is, as the name implies, allows water to go only in one direction. And so the return line can flow towards the tank, but when water tries to flow back down the return line to the sump, the little flap in the safeguard in the actual one-way valve will close and prevent that from happening. You have to keep those valves clean, because if they get built up with algae or perhaps a calcium buildup of some kind, they can remain open a little bit, and that will of course defeat the purpose. So from time to time you do need to take those valves off, give them a little scrub down and put them back on. Very simple, especially with the ones that are designed a lot like a union, where you simply unscrew the top and you're good to go. Now, the second safeguard, which is very, very effective, is having the outputs of the return line right up against the very top of the water line. And what that does is allows air to get into that line, and it breaks the siphon, and so it stops siphoning. And that's what's going on with my flexible return lines in the 300, and a variation of that in the 210 is that I've drilled a hole right near the water line on the hook return. I have a return on there that hooks onto the back of the tank, and there's a little hole drilled right at the water line, and that actually will break the siphon and not let the return line siphon water back. Now keep in mind, those lines also have one-way valves on them. So you have two safeguards on each of the return lines, a one-way valve and a siphon break to allow air in the line and not allow water to get back into the siphon. Now, your third safeguard, and the most important of all of them, is to run the right amount of water in your system. So in other words, when you do a water change or you first set up the tank, you fill up the sump tank to the level that if the pumps were to turn off, the water that returns tank will not overflow. So in other words, the water volume that you're running is set up. And you'll notice in this aquarium I have a blue piece of tape. That's how much I can fill that sump and not worry that if the pumps fail, by the time the back siphon air gets in the line and breaks the back siphon, and with the use of the one-way valves, that's how high the aquarium can be used. That's how high the sump can be filled to, and water that'll come back into the tank when the pumps are off is not going to be enough to overflow the sump tank. So those are your three safeguards. One-way valves and siphon breaks that introduce air into the return lines, and running the right amount of water in the system so that when pumps turn off, like when you're going to do maintenance, doesn't have to be a pump failure, it could be when you turn the pumps off to do maintenance, you know that the water that's going to go back into the sump is not enough to overflow the sump. And you test it. And you first time you set up your tank, you fill the sump up to a certain level, you fire up your pumps, let it run a little bit, then cut off the power and see how high the tank fills. If it starts getting too close to the top, turn the power back on so the pump moves water back in the tank, and then go ahead and remove some water from the system, and eventually you'll have it dialed in. You'll put a piece of tape on your sump tank and you'll not have to worry about flooding. All right, so there you go. Worrying about flooding is not a reason to not have a sump if you have these safeguards in place. Now, there are other moving parts. Plumbing, overflow boxes, things of that nature. Those are topics for another video. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, hit that bell, and maybe I'll see you on Saturday at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream every Saturday at 11 a.m. Central. That's 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And if you'd like to support the channel further, become a Patreon monthly supporter. Starts for as little as $3 a month. Helps tremendously. And if you'd like some more tips on sumps and sump filtration, check out this playlist. It's all about the king of filtration, sumps. And here are my best tips for fish keeping. And down here, hit me in the mug and you can subscribe to the channel. Thank you, my friends. See you later. Bye-bye.